I'm introducing Harjinder Singh Lally, who will give us a talk on Kirtan and its importance. He's a senior teaching fellow in cybersecurity at the University of Warwick and has been learning Sikh music since the age of 6. He's a passionate researcher in Sikh history, theology and musicology. He has published one book, is writing a second book, and is producing a number of academic papers in the domain of Sikh musicology. With Harjinder, we will explore the commoditization of Sikh music. So I'll now hand over to Harjinder. Thank you.
My talk is entitled The Commoditization of Sikh Music, and before I give the talk, I just want to give you a bit of background. My day job is indeed as a lecturer at the University of Warwick. My specialist subject is cyber forensics, cyber security, and my PhD research is in that domain as well. But by night, or at the weekend, or when I'm on my coffee break or lunch break, I'm very, very interested in Sikh music, and most particularly in the theory of Sikh music and the history of Sikh music. I, with my brother, run the Gurmat Sangeet Academy, which is a music academy in Birmingham. And what Jeevan's talk kind of reminded me of is the kind of experiences that we've been through, in that the Gurmat Sangeet Academy used to be based in a Gurdwara, and we had at that time around 60 to 80 students who turned up every Sunday morning at 7 o'clock to learn Kirtan and Sikh music. But for political reasons, with committees giving you a hard time and so on and so forth, we decided we weren't going to teach in a Gurdwara anymore, and we took our academy out. We're now based at King Edward School in Birmingham, and the kids love it even more now, but we're not being interfered with by committees. So it's going to be open, very frank, and hope you find it very interesting. I'm going to talk about how Kirtan changed in the last 162 years or so, and I'm going to begin to kind of try to explain or present some theories as to why it changed in the way that it did. I say present some theories because unfortunately there's a lot of research, there's a huge research gap in in our study of Sikhism generally, but certainly in study of Sikh music. I'm not here to offend your favorite raggi. I'm not criticizing Kirtan. What I am going to do is suggest, or try to encourage you to try and understand what we call the Gurmat Sangeet style of Kirtan a bit more, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a little while. I'm going to be very frank. I'm going to criticize the Raat, and like I say, if I did that in a Gurdwara, I wouldn't last long. And I'm going to be talking about groups that as a community generally we find very offensive. And in fact, I'm going to play the Kirtan of one of those groups which are generally banned from doing Kirtan in Gurdwara. And then we're going to finish the talk with a performance by the Gurmat Sangeet Academy students. And I'm not going to tell you about the performance, they will introduce it later on. So generally, when we hear Kirtan today, this is generally what we see. And the sound that we hear is quite, it's quite catchy. We can relate with it quite easily. And the scene we see in front of us there are typically 3 raggis. So it's typically 3 raggis, 2 playing the vajja, 1 playing the tabla, and it's pretty consistent. Generally that's the scene that we'd see, and the sound that we'd hear is something that we're very used to. However, if we go back to the beginning of the 20th century, and certainly before that, it would be very different. So what we have here is a painting, I've never been able to pronounce that name, Shaft. Around about 1840 to 1850, not quite sure when this was painted. It's part of the Princess Bamba collection. We have the Granthis, this is the Harmandir Sahib obviously, we have the Granthis doing the part there. We have Maharaja Ranjit Singh sitting here with his advisors. And if we take a closer look at this, we have some musicians doing, most likely kirtan. And we notice that this kirtani here is playing what we know today to be a rabab. And we notice something very particular about the tabla that he's playing, but I'll come back to that in a few moments. Here is a picture which is a late 18th century photograph of Hazur Sahib. And again, we notice something very particular. Number one, there's an instrument that this gentleman's playing. It's called a taus. If we look at the bottom there, it has the head of what looks like a peacock, and it's actually shaped like a peacock as well. It's a bowed instrument. It has frets. And we also notice something about the tabla that the chap accompanying him is playing. That's actually called a jodi, not a tabla. And what we notice about this is, number one, if you look very carefully there on the what we call the tamma, which is what the larger kind of half of the jodi is called, it doesn't have any ink on there. If we go back a few slides, you won't see it very clearly, but that one has ink on there. The shape is different. That one also has ink, so does that one. They're all pretty much the same. So what we have here is a very different instrument, right? That actually has atta on there. Atta is, the flour you make roti with. With that tamma, you have to put atta on there, right? What we also notice is that the pura, which is that one there, is a lot bigger than the pura that you would hear in the Gurdwara every weekend. Yeah, so that must be, I don't know, an 7-8 inch pura, whereas normally what we hear in the Gurdwara, and you'll see later on, is a 5.5 to 6 inch pura. So the point being that what the sound that you would have heard 100 years ago would be very different to the sound that you hear today, simply because the jodi is different, the instruments are different. Let's move forward a bit more. This was in the Illustrated London News of 1858. I haven't yet been able to get hold of the original newspaper, but this painting was published in there. It's by William Carpenter, and it's a scene of the Darbar Sahib in Harmandir Sahib as he would have seen it with his own eyes in 1858. We have the Guru Granth Sahib, of course. We have Sangat coming in and out, and most interestingly, again, we've got two raggis. What we have here is, again, something very interesting. The pura is almost the same height as the tamma. Just have a look at some of the factors that may have contributed to the way this landscape changed over that 150 years. So it's a big jigsaw, and I'm going to try and kind of, start putting some pieces into this jigsaw and just ask a few questions. What were we thinking of when we wrote the Raat? Because when we wrote the Raat, it's quite obvious that we didn't understand Sikh music when we wrote the Raat, otherwise we wouldn't have written this small passage in there about it, and I'll come back to that. The gramophone we generally consider to be very good for Sikh music. It propagated Sikh music, it propagated Kirtan around India, and I'm going to question that and ask, well, is that actually true? Who influenced who? Did Bollywood influence Sikh Kirtan, or did we influence Bollywood? That's one that I'm not quite at the bottom of yet. I'm going to talk about the Vajja, which is a harmonium that you see every week at the Gurdwara. And I'm going to just try and touch on a few other influences that affected our Kirtan. And I'm going to begin by talking about the Raat. This is a section of the Raat. It's chapter 5. And I'm going to pick on a few little points within the Raat. Sangat vich Kirtan keval Sikh hi kar sakda hai. Only a Sikh may do Kirtan in a congregation. Kirtan Gurbani nu raga vich ucharan karan nu kende han. And this is quite interesting. Kirtan means singing the scriptural compositions in traditional musical measures. That bit I'm not too, I don't really have problems, and I might touch on the fourth part of that in a few moments as well. So let's have a look at the first one. Only a Sikh may perform Kirtan in a congregation. by Ghulam Muhammad Chand, came to the UK very recently. They say they're from the family of Mardana, but what we do know about them is that they have been doing Kirtan in the Sikh Panth, or their family has, for well over 100 years, and it was only until recently that they were banned from doing Kirtan in the Darbar Sahib. And if you go to the Pakistani Gurdwara, you'll find that a lot of their family is still doing Kirtan there today. So by kind of stating that only a Sikh may perform Kirtan, the problem we open ourselves up to is, who is a Sikh? Yeah, how do you define who a Sikh is? Because you immediately isolate by, Ghulam Chand and so forth, and we've immediately isolated the Namdaris. Right? I'm going to say a few words about the Namdaris. Again, only until recently they were able to do Kirtan in the Darbar Sahib. This is only a recent kind of phenomenon that we said even they are not allowed to do Kirtan in the Darbar Sahib. I have recordings of the Namdaris doing Kirtan in the Darbar Sahib. I'm going to try and make this quite kind of musically entertaining, in that I'm going to play kind of clips of music as the Kirtan, as the talk progresses, just so that I can demonstrate some of the things, the nuances that I believe are now missing from our Kirtan, or the Kirtan that you'll hear every week. This is a clip of by Baljit Singh, who in my eyes is one of the greatest Kirtanis alive today. That's my personal view, if not the greatest. Yeah, I'm going to give you a small snippet of his Kirtan. First of all, what you'll notice is that there's an instrument being played there, and what they're doing is they're playing what's known as a tarshanai, which is a relatively modern instrument. But what we also heard in that piece of music was the shabd. Obviously we didn't hear all the shabd, and then they stopped and they played a piece of music. That music is called a shan. You will rarely, if ever, hear that in Kirtan today, where you do a shabd, you stop, and then you play a piece of music. Yeah, as a shan, as a kind of interlude or a little kind of, section within the Kirtan. Let's have a look at another problem that I have with this. This is very, very vague here. It says, Kirtan Gurbani nu raga vich ucharan karan nu kahnde han, which means they say that you should do Kirtan in rags. It's very non-committal. Yeah? Which rags should we do Kirtan in? It doesn't specify clearly, as a statement that not just any rag, you should do it in the rag that it's written in. So every shabd, as Jeevan Singh said earlier on, begins with the name of a rag. It doesn't say that every rag, every shabd should be sung within the rag within which it is written. And because it doesn't say that, ragis can creatively interpret that it doesn't matter which rag I do the Kirtan in. The other problem is, like I say, it's not very committal. It is suggested, which is what Gendehan means. It doesn't say thou shalt do Kirtan in the rags that it is written in. It just they say you should do Kirtan in rag. Yeah? And if it is the case that we should do Kirtan in rag, then why are so many Hazuri Ragis? Hazuri Ragi, incidentally, when you hear this term Hazuri Ragi, by what's his name Singh, Hajuri Ragi, that means that they are an established Ragi at Harmandir Sahib. That they are from Harmandir Sahib and they have a slot there at Harmandir Sahib. And that's how you get this title or this suffix, Hazuri Ragi. Yeah? So if that is the case, where so many Hazuri Ragis selected who do not have any rag knowledge, yeah, if that is part of the red, so we can immediately see problems in that. Number one, the definitions are problematic. But number two, even though the definitions may be problematic, we're not even implementing or adhering to the kind of definitions that are given therein. Okay, now the other problem we have here is it is improper while singing hymns to rhythmic folk tunes, obviously that's not precisely the wording used there, to induct into them improvised and extraneous refrains. I'll explain what I mean by that, and I'll give you 3 demonstrations. Only a line from the hymn should be made a refrain. So let me explain that. When you hear a shabd in a gurdwara, the raggi will start from the first line and they'll sing the whole shabd through from beginning to end, and it'll just be that one single shabd. But if we go back even to the 40s, for instance, we can't go back further than that because we don't have recordings further than that. But the recordings that we do have, which for instance go back to 1940, what raggis used to do was put into the shabd something known as a praman. Let me explain what a praman is. I'll give you a demonstration of that. Yeah, this is by Dharm Singh Zakhmi, another of my absolute favorite raggis, and just listen to this for a few moments. Okay, so what we had there was at the end of the shabd they stopped and just sang the words without the tabla. They just sang out the words of the shabd. Yeah, kot karm karde na soda. Then what they did was they went into another shabd, karmi sahajana upajay, which isn't part of that original shabd that they were singing. So the purpose of a praman was to support and emphasize a particular line in the shabd that you're singing. It's like you know, when you study, you use references from papers. Yeah, you bring other references from papers to support your argument. In the same way, we use praman. You sing the shabd, and what Bhai Dharm Singh did there was they used a line from another shabd to emphasize that particular shabd that they were singing, or that verse from the shabd they were singing. Praman means support, proof. Here's another example. This time it's from a raggi called Bhai Avtar Singh, who sadly passed away very recently. So we have another example there. That's a 1975 recording at Nineveh Road. And what they did was they carried on singing the shabd, the tabla carried on, and they added some praman into the shabd. And the last example is another favorite of mine by Bahadur Singh. And I'll... So what happens there is, in this particular recording, early 80s, by Bahadur Singh, goes into, I think it's 10 minute section of the Kirtan, where all they do is just sing Praman after Praman after Praman after Praman after Praman. And what's happened with this ruling, and incidentally, I should add, there's a Raggi I'm going to talk about later on. I've got a collection of his 1940 recordings. It's not just the 70s and the 80s that we were still singing Praman. If you go back to the 40s, which is the earliest record we generally have, most Raggis put Praman into the Kirtan. It was a kind of acknowledged style of doing Kirtan. By forbidding Raggis from using Praman, there's this whole kind of area of creative kind of interpretation, or kind of creatively emphasizing certain parts of the Shabd in order to get the message across of the Shabd, that we virtually eliminated from our Kirtan. So that's one, in my view, the Raat had some part to play in the way that Kirtan changed. All India radio station had, it started to air recordings around about the I think it was the mid-40s, and we were under very strict time restrictions on what they could broadcast, and those time restrictions were generally directed by how long a gramophone track was, which was about 3 minutes long. In 3 minutes, you cannot sing the full Shabd in the way that some of these Raggis sang. So I'm going to introduce some technical terms here, right? I can explain these afterwards if you want, but a typical Kirtan performance up to around the 60s, 70s comprised of a shan, which was a piece of music to introduce the Kirtan, a Mangalacharan. You may still hear this today, Dandot, Bandhani, Anikabar, Sarb Kala Samrat. They'll start with just singing a small Shabd without the tabla, then they'll go into the Shabd. There's at least 3 different types of Mangalacharan that you can sing. So there's not just the one. There's what we call the Alap based, the Vak Shabd, the Pankti Shabd Mangalacharan. Then there might be an Alap, there'll be the Shabd which will have Alaps in there, there'll be Praman in there. The tabla player will have an opportunity to play tabla and play particular compositions inside the Shabds. You can see that you can't get a Shabd into 3 minutes. You can't do all of that. So what Bhai Santa Singh and a lot of Raggis found was that in 3 minutes somehow they had to produce the whole Shabd. So it's easy. What we do is remove the Shan, remove all the Pramans, remove all the Alaps, remove the Mangalacharan, and we can get the Shabd within that 3 minutes. So all the 1940s and 50s recordings that we have are simply a Shabd, beginning to end, with no none of the traditional, the nuances that we know to have existed before that. Incidentally, what we call this here, this kind of technical description of a Shabd, we call it the Jonki structure. We call it the Jonki structure because in Harmandir Sahib, up until recently, every Raggi had to follow a particular structure when they did their Kirtan. That's by Santa Singh, and he was a Darbar Sahib Raggi, brilliant Raggi. You have to do a search afterwards on YouTube for Bhai Santa Singh. His 1940s recordings are up there. Yeah, you can listen to them. The 3 minute tracks that I'm referring to, they're all up there. He became the first Sikh Raggi in 1937 on All India Radio. He was a famous Darbar Sahib Raggi, and he moved to Delhi after, either before or just during the partition, and he personally experienced the tragedy of the partition. So he was a kind of went through this himself. And when he got to Delhi, there were tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands perhaps of Sikhs who came to Delhi during partition who'd lost everything. And if we listen to their interviews and their anecdotes, they say that he was a tremendous source of inspiration to them, because he was a Raggi. There were 2 Raggis, by Santa Singh and Sant Sujan Singh, that they used to go and listen to every day. He's a very famous Raggi. It's a shame we don't know much about him. Now, we don't have a conclusive set of Raggi gramophone recordings, I have lists of 1902, 1903, 1904 recordings. I've got the names of the ragis, the rags and so forth, but we don't have the original recordings. I'm sure they exist somewhere. But he was one of the first ragis that recorded for the gramophone. These are 3.5-minute recordings. And a lot of the kirtan on the gramophone was influenced by what the studio bosses told us you need to do. So they said, look, we're going to record you, but you're going to have the Hawaiian guitar in there, or you're going to have the piano in there. So I've got some recordings which have the piano. It sounds really strange, but it's in there. And what we also find, you know, that there's a handful of recordings where even in 3.5 minutes, a raggi tries to, you know, does an alap, they do a shahan, they do brahman. So there are some very, very few recordings where we get the full kind of, you know, the structure of a shabd presented in there. And I'm sure there's cases of raggis as well who would not compromise and probably never got recorded. Okay, I'm quite conscious about time. Let's move on very quickly. Let's just spend a few minutes talking about the vajra, the harmonium. Invented around about 1842, or patented at least at that time. It was a very popular instrument amongst Portuguese missionaries because they wanted to perform their, you know, Christian worship whilst on the road. They couldn't carry a huge organ with them, so they took the bajra. Yeah, it's much more portable and they can do their singing with that. It was brought to India around about 1870, 1880 to the southern parts of India. By 1875 in Calcutta, we've started to manufacture the harmonium. The one that we use today, incidentally, that style of harmonium, if you Wikipedia this, you'll see many different old styles of the bajra. This is the version that was patented by Alexandre de Baines. In 1905, we are told that the bajra entered Harmandir Sahib for the first time. And when it was brought into Harmandir Sahib, the raggis protested. They didn't want this bajra being brought in, and the reason for that was twofold. Number one, they felt this would corrupt our kirtan style, you know, our traditions. But secondly, by this time, the bajra had already acquired the reputation of being, and you'll have to excuse my language here, a kanjriyan da saaj or a kothiyan da saaj. Which means by that time it was being played where ladies dance. You know, it was being played to accompany guys who played tabla, play the bajra, and the lady dances. So it had already acquired quite a nasty reputation by this time. So it almost felt sacrilegious that someone had brought the bajra in. Nevertheless, as we know, it prevailed. But it wasn't just us that protested about the bajra. It wasn't just the Sikh raggis. Very famous figures. Does anyone know who that is? You must know that figure there. Yeah? Is that Tagore? That is Rabindranath Tagore. Right? He protested. He wrote a number of articles in the Dawn, which is a Calcutta newspaper. Mahatma Gandhi complained and said to the Indians, don't be influenced by this. This is a Western instrument. Right? So it wasn't just the Sikhs. A lot of leading figures complained, protested that we should not let the bajra corrupt our kirtan. By 1913, the bajra overtakes traditional instruments, and in fact, India becomes the biggest market for the harmonium in the world. So now you see scenes a bit later on. This must be the 50s. This is a great classical singer, Bade Ghulam Ali Khan, where a lot of his recordings he's accompanied by a sarangi player, but probably just as many of them he's accompanied by a vajra player. Today in Indian classical music, the majority of artists will be accompanied by a vajra player and not a sarangi player. So, you know, even by 1913, this had become very popular. I'm going to skip that, and I heard an interview, it's on YouTube, I'm not going to say who it is or where it is because this is being broadcast, but I can tell you about it later on, where a Sikh scholar suggests that the demise of Gurmat Sangeet, or the demise of our traditions, are solely, purely and simply down to the influence of the East India Company. That it was a British that deliberately manipulated our kirtan and our styles and our rita to try and corrupt the kirtan because they felt it was too powerful and so on and so forth. Well, 1938, John Herbert Folds writes an article entitled "The Harmonium." I've got a copy of that if anyone wants to see it, if anyone wants to read it. He was a close friend of Lionel Fielden, who was at that time the All India controller of broadcasting. He determined what went live on air and what didn't go live on air. Lionel Fielden banned the Bajja from All India Radio, and the reasons for banning the Bajja was he said that you cannot reproduce your classical music and that style of singing and so on and so forth with a Bajja. You can't reproduce those rags, right? You can't reproduce those songs that you've been singing for centuries, right? It remained banned until 1970, by which time we, or rather the Indians, had taken over, obviously, All India Radio again. That's just one example where even the British are saying to us that, come on guys, you do not want to be doing your kirtan or playing your music on this instrument. And I have many, many other examples I can give. So, what did we do? I say we as in Indians, not we as Sikhs. What did we do when All India Radio banned the Bajja? Well, we mourned the death of the Bajja and conducted a funeral procession of 11 harmoniums around the studio. Proper, legitimate, funeral procession is probably there probably wasn't a death certificate attached to it, right? But we felt that the British were interfering with our music. So that's a very interesting perspective now. That actually what we thought was not that they were corrupting our music, but we felt they were corrupting our creativity. We want to experiment with all these instruments, and they're not letting us. They're saying, no, stick to your traditional instruments, that's what you're good at, and so forth. So that's a very interesting perspective. By the 60s, the Namtaris are virtually the only ones in the Bant who are still playing Tanti Sahaj. So as an upshot, the Vajja has become so popular, right? There's very, very few people who now play it. Now, my own experience is that around about 1997, I wanted to learn stringed instruments, Tanti Sahaj, Dilraba, and I couldn't find a teacher anywhere in Birmingham, anywhere in the Midlands, and I had to travel to Southall every week to learn from my teacher, my Ustad Sarjeet Singh, and I did that pretty much every week for around, I reckon, 2 years. And that's the distance, we had to cover to learn these instruments, because the Namtaris were the only ones who had held on to these instruments. Now that, people in the Gurdwara, people don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear the word Namtari, or that we should be thanking them for something, and so on and so forth. But that is the reality. There are anecdotes of people like Muhammad Rafi, Lata Mangeshkar coming to Darbar Sahib. Raggis are telling us that they used to sit there with a notepad, writing down tunes that we were singing, and that they used to visit Harmandir Sahib regularly. Bare Ghulam, fabulous singer, absolutely beautiful voice, used to come and listen to Sant Sajan sing in Delhi, and numerous times suggested that what you have, I don't I don't have the kind of the tradition that you have. But the point being that it may have been possible that we influenced Bollywood just as much as it influenced us, and we can't claim that all our kirtan is Bollywood based until we've surveyed that and we've done the research. But what I am going to give you examples of is that there are very clear examples where we have put our shabds on Bollywood tunes. I wouldn't be able to do this in a Gurdwara, right? So I'm going to play a shabd, and we're going to play a little game. Tell me which Bollywood song this is. Just put your hand up as soon as you know. No? You've got a big smile on your face, Uncle Ji, Darvinder Singh. Okay, don't name the song. So that's one raggi. You hear the two. Na 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 na. Listen to this one. different ragi. Two more examples of that song, 4 different ragis, same tune, right? Here is the original. (1962). You're walking along and the ragi singing a famous Bollywood song and you're nudging each other, and you know, that's that song from that film, yeah. But the point being that, in fact, I'm gathering these, you know, collections of Bollywood songs and shabads that we've put on Bollywood songs, just to demonstrate that it isn't just a misconception, that there genuinely is evidence that we're getting lazy and we're kind of putting our shabds onto Bollywood songs. Okay, now the last part of my talk, I've got 5 minutes left, so I'll try and just complete this now. The last part of my talk, what I want to give are other reasons as to how and why kind of Sikh music has changed over the last 150 years. What we have here is a pretty lazy lion, yeah? Because I think it's because we have become quite lazy. We will, you know, we're Asians, we're Indians, we will find the shortcut way of doing something, yeah? So when you do kirtan, and the reason why the students have gone, yeah, they've all left, it's not because I've offended them, right? I do enough of that every Sunday morning. It's because they've gone to tune their instruments up. Right? It takes around 5 minutes to tune a dilruba before a kirtan and in between shabads. Right? I've done kirtans where we've sat there, you know, there's 6, 7 instruments, taus, dilruba, sarangi, and we're tuning them up. It's taking a bit longer than it normally does. The sangat started to get a bit restless. And you know, the state secretary will come along and say, "Tusi kar deni shuru, you know, why don't you start your kirtan?" Right? That's, you know, one little problem we have to deal with. Whereas the vajja, you retune that every 3 years, 4 years perhaps. I did kirtan up to 1997 on a vajja, so that was what, 26 years, and then, you know, from then I've been doing it on Danti Saj. But let me just bring in another anecdote here by Avtar Singh, who is, you know, another of the greatest ragis of last century and early this century. His tabla player by Swarn Singh told me that they did kirtan at Harmandir Sahib around 8 years ago, and by Swarn Singh uses the atte ala tamma. I mentioned that earlier on. It's the tabla that you have to put atta on. Atta being what you make roti out of, yeah, flour. It's quite wet. Stick it on, put a bit of powder on, and it booms. Yeah, when you play it, the sound is just completely different. Yeah, you can't reproduce that sound on a duggi. And at the end of their kirtan, the atta had flown off everywhere, because that's what happens, right? It, you know, just as you start playing, it starts coming off, and there's a bit of a mess, you know, around the area you're seated. And if you've seen Harmandir Sahib kirtan, you know, you're sitting right in front of the kind of the bashai. Right, so if just look carefully, look in front of the ragis, there's that area where no one's allowed really to step, and the atta was all over there. And the granthi came to him afterwards and said, "Tusya klara ja pata hai," right, that you've made all this mess. Right, and he said, "Oh, we've been making this mess for 500 years." Right, no one said anything then, and how come you're complaining now that we've made all this mess? Yeah, so we have become quite lazy. There's one example there. It's just too much effort having to tune the dilruba every time we do kirtan. It requires a lot of practice and dedication, this does. Anyone here learnt the violin? Oh, there's 2 people here, so you know how much dedication. What have you done any graded exams?
Yeah, I did one.
Okay, that's good enough. What about you? Okay, but you know how much practice you have to put in, yeah? You did practice, didn't you? But it requires a lot of practice, yeah? Now, in our academy, in the Gurmat Sangeet Academy, the first 2 semesters are foundation building. You learn a load of what we call alankars, kind of patterns. You know, just like that, many different patterns, and you spend 2 semesters, which is around 24 weeks of our year, just doing that. And quite often, a student is ready at the end of that, assuming they have practiced, you know, typically half an hour to an hour a day, they're normally ready now to move on to rag. Right? I get asked very often, I've not, you know, it's almost, they always sound apologetic, I've never done kirtan before. Can I learn this, right? I quite often would rather you hadn't learned kirtan before, because all those little kind of habits you've developed, we don't have to deal with them. But anyway, normally 2 semesters is enough to get you onto a rag. Quite often it might be 3 semesters, which is a year. So it's taken 1 year now to get you onto a shabd. Vajja, typically 6 to 8 weeks, you know, maximum, and you're on your first shabd. So you see the results a lot quicker. Parents can see the results. Oh wow, my Billu's learning kirtan now, you know, he's learned his first shabd. It's very different with these instruments. These are classical instruments and they deserve a lot of rihaz, i.e. practice. Yeah, the problem is, have you seen the very small bajje, the ones that you can fold down? Yeah, so a bajja is typically about this big. Yeah, about that big. I haven't got an example I can give you. But we now have this kind of version of the bajja, which we call a peti. Peti just means box, which you can fold down. Now it's that big, so it's very portable. Yeah, it's just like a small suitcase. You can't, you know, so getting from Delhi to Punjab, carrying 2 of those and a tabla is quite easy, but carrying a taus, 2 dilrbars and a jodi is just not as practical. Yeah, so we do, you know, it just doesn't make practical sense to learn these instruments. So as I said a moment ago, you know, 5 to 8 weeks you could be learning your first shabd on a vajja, but on a dilrba it takes a lot longer than that. So I think there is an element of that kind of, you know, bend culture kind of creeping in here, where we're just too lazy. We just want the shortcut route to get to learn a shabd. The shortcut route is learn bajja, and you know, you don't have to worry about tuning. You don't have to worry about you know, carrying it around and so on, spending all that time. The other thing that is also very difficult is, have you ever tried to sing while you play the violin? There's not many people who do that, are there? He has. Was that a yes? He just won't admit it, yeah? There's not many people who do that, because singing and playing an instrument, other than a guitar or something which is fretted, yeah, it's quite difficult, right? So singing and playing the dilraba, where on the one hand you're trying to focus on the kind of the frets that you're playing, at the same time you're trying to project your voice, and then, you know, you've got the words in front of you, kind of adds to that complication. But our students manage it magnificently. You know, they manage it very well. Okay, now that is everything I wanted to talk about.
We're all students of the Gurmat Sangeet Academy. Our teacher, Harjinder Singh Lally, you've just heard. You know, we've had the privilege and honour of learning from him. He's put up with us, put up with our impatience, our not turning up to class, our not practicing for many, many years. And you know, so if tonight we manage to do anything, play anything nice, then, you know, please attribute that to our teacher and to our guru that gave us that teacher. If you make any mistakes, then unfortunately they're ours. So you have before you, so again, for many years, by the grace of Guru, you know, we've been trying to sort of play these saj, and by no means, like I said, we're all amateurs, and we're not, you know, by any means good, but that doesn't necessarily matter within the realms of Gurmat Sangeet. And I've recently come to this understanding. You know, before I was seeking perfection and I wanted to sound like Gurmeet Singh Naam Tari and be amazing like him. But there's another aspect of Gurmat Sangeet, and that's humility. So even though we're not amazing, we don't sound incredible like these amazing, wonderful kirtanis, these examples, these ratan, these jewels of the panth. Even just playing, sitting in a room by yourself, playing the odd duff note, going off beat and coming back, that devotional aspect of Gurmat Sangeet is equally important. So often when you approach these saj, they're very difficult, you know, which is, the vajja has its appeal. And these instruments are very difficult, they take a lot of commitment and effort. And approach, you know, come with humility and ask for the gift of kirtan. And it doesn't matter how far you get, how good you get. just do it by the grace of the Guru. ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।